Hello YouTube. Oblivion is full of interesting characters, and one of the most interesting and to an extent most controversial characters is the interim ruler of the Empire at the time of the Oblivion crisis, High Chancellor Okato of the Elder Council, or Okato of First Hold. So what makes this guy so special? Well, we'll talk about it after the intro. So, High Chancellor Okato, or Okato of First Hold, was a High Elf or Altmer politician serving as head of the Septim Empire's Elder Council during the years leading up to the Oblivion crisis, and fungated as the Empire's interim ruler during the crisis after the assassination of Emperor Uriel Septim VII at the start of the game in Oblivion. Now, Okato was born into a noble Altmer family, likely in the city of First Hold, located in the Somerset Isles. From a young age, he seems to have received an elite education in magic, eventually becoming a highly skilled and powerful battle mage. In the following years, most likely when he became an adult, somewhere before the year 389 of the Third Era, Okato had become a representative on the Elder Council of the Septim Empire, its sort of parliament. It's presumed that he represented either the Somerset Isles or represented his home city of First Hold, although the exact structure of representation within the Elder Council has never really been clear and has changed throughout the years, so what exactly his role was before becoming High Chancellor, we don't really know. Now, after the defeat of Jaegar Tharn, the former battle mage of Emperor Uriel Septim VII, who had actually impersonated Emperor Uriel Septim VII for nearly a decade during the event of the Elder Scrolls Arena, when the Emperor himself was locked away in a pocket plane of Oblivion while Jaegar Tharn, disguised as the Emperor, ruled the Empire underwent a major political purge of sorts after he was ousted. Many high-ranking nobles who had collaborated with Tharn or turned a blind eye in exchange for personal gain were likely removed, and new loyal faces entered the Empire's elite circles. It was during this time that Okato gained the Emperor's trust, replacing Jaegar Tharn as the Emperor's personal battle mage, and after a while his loyalty and service on the Elder Council solidified his position as one of Uriel Septim VII's most trusted advisors and closest friends. Now, eventually this trust and partnership led Okato to ascend to the role of High Chancellor, essentially the head and chairman of the Elder Council and the second most powerful person in the Septim Empire. He and Emperor Uriel formed a quite amazing team, often crafting major policy decisions together, and it was them who also together came up with the secret mission to Daggerfall, which kicked off the events of the Elder Scrolls II and culminated in the Miracle of Peace in High Rock. Now, it's also believed that Okato played a role in advising Uriel VII to send the Nerevarine to Morrowind, as a decision which then led to the eventual defeat of Dagoth in the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. During his time as Chancellor, Okato's loyalty never seems to have wavered. After the assassination of Uriel Septim VII and the extinction of the Septim bloodline at the start of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, Okato never attempted to seize power, and instead he supported the claim of Martin Septim, the Emperor's bastard son, when he came forward. And during the crisis he worked tirelessly to keep the Empire stable during the emerging Oblivion crisis. He coordinated the efforts with the Elder Council and becoming the de facto leader and regent of the Empire during the chaos. And it's in that role that we meet him in the game. Now, while he was applauded by many for holding the Empire together during the crisis, he wasn't without his critics. Some nobles accused him of trying to grab power, for example, while others claimed that he favored either the provinces or the heartland of Cyrodiil too much, depending on who you ask. For example, those in Morrowind claimed that Okato pulled troops to Cyrodiil to relieve it, leaving Morrowind to die basically, while those in Cyrodiil during the crisis claimed that Okato refused to pull troops from the provinces in order to keep the Empire together, thus letting Cyrodiil bleed. But to be honest, these different criticisms likely just reflect the impossible position of leadership during a crisis rather than any clear wrongdoing, as Okato truly seems to have led the Empire as faithfully as he could and combated the Oblivion crisis as best he could. Now, during the climax of the Oblivion crisis, Okato personally received Martin Septim in the Imperial city during the main questline. Tragically though, this was too late, as Mehrunes Dagon himself invaded Nirn in a final-ditch effort to complete the destruction of the mortal plane. To stop this, Martin then of course sacrificed himself, becoming the avatar of Akatosh to banish Dagon and seal the barrier between Nirn and Oblivion forever, and in doing so, he also shattered the Amulet of Kings, and he ended the need for a Dragonborn Emperor to maintain the barrier. Once again at this point, Okato refused to seize power, even when there was no septim heir left and people begged him to take power to keep the empire stable, as many, including Okato himself, probably noticed that if there's no need for a dragonborn ruler, anyone could take power, so that was an invitation to chaos. But Okato instead attempted to find a new emperor to unify the empire, thinking that he himself was not the unifying figure that the empire needed probably. But the other council could not agree on a successor. Only after repeated requests from the council itself, Okato accepted the title of Potentate, as he was the only one who they could agree on. And as a title of Potentate, he was a temporary ruler and not even an emperor, just a temporary ruler to provide stability and lead the reconstruction efforts in the wake of the Oblivion crisis, with the intention to then get a new emperor when things settled down a bit. It seems that he relented finally because the empire was landing in a second crisis in these months, and Okato probably anticipated even further troubles that you would need a strong leader to solve. As he was aware that the provinces were already restless before the Oblivion crisis, and despite his efforts in these years to hold the empire together, the empire slowly started sliding back into a crisis, because only 4 years after Okato's potentate reign started, in a period when he was seemingly doing a pretty good job in stabilizing the situation, the empire began to rapidly collapse as Morrowind suffered the cataclysmic Red Year with the eruption of the Red Mountain, which destroyed most of Morrowind, and that was then followed by the Argonians invading Morrowind barely 2 years later during the Accession War, seemingly as a revenge for centuries of slavery. And this invasion also led to Black Marsh's official secession from the empire. And other provinces in the meantime also began to fracture, and regional wars erupted across northwestern Tamriel apparently. And as if this weren't enough, Okato himself was assassinated in the year 15 of the 4th era. Who exactly took him out was never officially confirmed, but suspicion falls heavily on the Thalmor, because you see, Okato as a high elf understood the dangers of rising extremism within his homeland of the Somerset Isles, and during his time as potentate, the Thalmor had gained more and more power and public favor in the Somerset Isles, by claiming credit for ending the Oblivion crisis and claiming that it was them and not Martin Septim who ended the crisis, which led to a lot of popularity and a lot of anti-imperial sentiments in the Somerset Isles. Okato viewed their rise with grave concern and allegedly began taking steps to oppose them, but before he could truly act, he was killed, likely by Thalmor agents. His death then marked the beginning of the so-called Stormcrown Interregnum, which is a chaotic 7-year period where petty rulers vied for control over the Ruby Throne, and then the empire fragmented even further. Eventually, order would be restored under Titus Mede, who seized power and began reuniting the empire eventually, but that's a story for another time and another video. That being said, I still think that Okato is a bit of a tragic figure. He seemingly truly tried to do the best he could to keep the empire together and rule it as fairly as possible, but the tide and times just simply seems to have been against him, which is pretty sad. And you could also make a case for if he had just, grabbed power a little bit earlier and hadn't wasted precious months trying to find a new emperor, but acted perhaps a bit more decisively after the Oblivion crisis, a lot of problems may have been lessened a bit. But hey, we'll never know, as this is simply how history ended up being. And that is basically all I can say about High Chancellor Okato, and I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, why not give the video a like, as that's how YouTube, decides which content is worthy and which isn't. Anyway, all that's left for me to be done is to thank my top Patreon supporters, Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Doji, Hunter Joe, KLegendM, King Chris 20, RB Dash, Volkir of Argonia, Devin Mattingly, Rakai, and Sordo Bushido. These people, along with all the others on screen, keep my channel afloat, and for that I am very grateful. That said, I will see you all in the next Elder Scrolls Lore video, probably next week.